This is the story of Kenoshia Wheeler. On October 3, 2025, Greenville County Communications received a 911 call from 1 Beatty Street. The caller reported an unresponsive female, possibly in cardiac arrest. Emergency medical services were dispatched immediately to the quiet residential neighborhood just miles from downtown Greenville, South Carolina. When first responders arrived at the single-story residence, they found 29-year-old Kenoshia Wheeler lying motionless. But this was not a cardiac arrest. Wheeler had suffered a gunshot wound. Paramedics attempted life-saving measures, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office secured the residence as a crime scene. Inside the home Wheeler shared with a domestic partner, 33-year-old Deandra James, investigators began piecing together the events of that Thursday night. The preliminary investigation revealed that the fatal shooting occurred during a verbal altercation between the two women. Within hours, Deandra James was taken into custody. She was transported to the Greenville County Detention Center and booked on 2 charges: murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. A judge denied bond. She would await trial behind bars.
And a first alert in Greenville County, a homicide investigation is underway after the sheriff's office says a woman shot and killed her partner. Deputies responded to Beatty Street around 10:30 last night. There they found Kenoshia Wheeler shot with a gunshot wound. Deputies say Wheeler and her partner, Deandra James, got into an argument that led up to the shooting. James was arrested and charged with murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. She was booked into the Greenville County Detention Center and denied bond.
The Greenville County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy. The cause of death: gunshot wound. The manner of death: homicide. What began as an ordinary October evening on a tree-lined street in Greenville County ended with a young woman dead. This is the complete story, every action, every chilling detail. Welcome to Everyday True Crime. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Stay with us for more gripping investigations and raw true crime stories delivered daily. Now let's dive in. Kenoshia Wheeler entered the world on September 17, 1996, born to parents Gregory and Melissa Wheeler in Lake City, South Carolina. Lake City is a small town located in Florence County, with a population of approximately 6,000 residents. The town sits in the northeastern part of the state, characterized by rural landscapes and tight-knit community bonds typical of small southern towns. The Wheeler household consisted of Gregory and Melissa as the parental figures, with Kenoshia growing up alongside her siblings, Nicholas, Shakayla, and J1. The family structure provided Kenoshia with a foundation of sibling relationships that would remain significant throughout her life. Within her family circle, Kenoshia was known by the nickname Nosha, a shortened, affectionate version of her given name that family members and close friends used to address her. At the age of 12, Kenoshia made a significant decision that would shape her teenage and adult years. She joined Oak Grove AME Church, a congregation within the African Methodist Episcopal denomination. This decision marked her formal acceptance of Christ as her Lord and Savior, representing a pivotal spiritual commitment during her pre-adolescent years. Her involvement in the church extended beyond mere attendance at Sunday services. Kenoshia became an active participant in the church's praise dance team, a ministry that combines choreographed movement with worship music to express devotion and faith. This form of worship allowed her to engage with her spirituality through physical expression and artistic performance. Additionally, she joined the church choir, contributing her voice to congregational worship and musical presentations. These activities positioned her as a visible and engaged member of the church community from a young age. Later in her life, Kenoshia would also become involved with St. Mark AME Church, expanding her spiritual network within the AME denomination. The church community played a substantial role in her social and spiritual development, providing a framework for her values and a support network that extended beyond her immediate family. Kenoshia attended Lake City High School, the local secondary educational institution serving the Lake City community. During her high school years, she participated in academic coursework and engaged in extracurricular activities, forming friendships that would be part of her adolescent experience. She successfully completed her high school education and graduated from Lake City High School, marking a significant milestone in her educational journey. Following her high school graduation, Kinoshia made the decision to pursue formal training in culinary arts. This educational path indicated a deliberate choice to develop professional skills in food preparation, cooking techniques, and culinary management. The motivation behind this decision, whether rooted in family cooking traditions, personal passion for food, or practical career considerations, represented a concrete direction for her post-secondary education. Through her culinary training, she developed technical skills in food preparation, menu planning, kitchen management, and the artistic presentation of dishes. Following her culinary education, Kinoshia developed a professional identity under the moniker Chef K. This branding represented her emergence as a culinary professional and allowed her to establish recognition within her community. As Chef K, she built a reputation through catering services, preparing food for various events, gatherings, and celebrations. The nature of her culinary specializations, signature dishes, and cooking style became part of her professional identity. Her catering business required skills beyond cooking, client communication, event planning, food cost calculation, menu customization, and reliable delivery of services. Through these endeavors, she accumulated client testimonials and community recognition. Social media platforms likely served as a marketing tool, allowing her to showcase photographs of her culinary creations, announce availability for catering services, and build a digital portfolio of her work. Parallel to her culinary pursuits, Kinoshia maintained employment at Resurgent Capital Sources. This company operates in the financial services sector, specifically in areas related to collection services and financial recovery. The exact nature of her role and responsibilities at this organization involved professional duties that provided her with regular income, financial stability, and workplace structure. This employment represented the practical necessity of maintaining steady income while pursuing her culinary passion. The balance between her day job at Resurgent Capital Sources and her culinary endeavors as Chef K required time management, energy allocation, and strategic planning. This dual-track professional life indicated both her commitment to financial independence and her dedication to her culinary passion. Her career aspirations likely involved expanding her catering business, potentially opening her own culinary establishment, or achieving greater recognition in the food service industry. At 29 years old, Kinoshia had established her life in Greenville County, South Carolina, residing on Beatty Street. This represented a geographical move from her hometown of Lake City to Greenville, a larger urban area located in the northwestern part of the state. Greenville is the sixth largest city in South Carolina, with a population exceeding 70,000 in the city proper and over 500,000 in the metropolitan area. The move from Lake City to Greenville represented a transition from a small rural town to a more urbanized environment with greater economic opportunities, cultural amenities, and professional possibilities. Beatty Street is located in a working-class residential neighborhood within approximately 3 miles of downtown Greenville. The area features tree-lined streets with cottage-style homes, a mix of rental properties and owner-occupied residences, and a demographic composition reflective of working and middle-class families. This neighborhood provided Kinoshia with accessible housing in proximity to urban employment opportunities while maintaining a residential community atmosphere. Her daily routines at this stage of life would have included work responsibilities at Resurgent Capital Sources, culinary preparations for catering clients, personal time management, social interactions with friends, and participation in church activities. Her personality, as described by those who knew her, contributed to how she navigated her social circles and professional relationships. Kinoshia maintained connections with her immediate and extended family throughout her life. Her parents, Gregory and Melissa Wheeler, represented the foundational parental relationship. Her brother Nicholas had married a woman named Kristen, establishing his own household unit. Her sister Shakayla and brother J1, the youngest of the Wheeler siblings, rounded out the immediate sibling group. Kinoshia had assumed the role of aunt to 3 children, nephews Noah and Eli Wheeler, and niece Serenity Thomas. This aunt-niece-nephew relationship positioned her as an extended family figure in the lives of these children, participating in family gatherings, celebrations, and the broader family network. Her extended family included grandparents Regina and John McCrae, and Leroy Durant, who were living at the time of her death. However, Kino Shea had experienced multiple family losses prior to October 2025. Her grandmother Glory M. Wheeler had passed away, as had grandfathers Levi Brown and Frank Wheeler. Earlier generations had also died: great-grandmother Nancy McFadden, great-great-grandmother Hattie Wheeler, and great-great-great-grandmother Addie Wilder. Additional family losses included aunts Tammy Wheeler and Jennifer Johnson, and uncles Lonzel Wheeler, Jeffrey Pendergrass, Larry Brown, and Liddell Mackenzie. These accumulated losses represented a pattern of grief and bereavement that Kino Shea had processed throughout her life. The experience of multiple family deaths potentially shaped her perspectives on mortality, family connection, and the importance of maintaining relationships with living relatives. Family gatherings and traditions provided structure for maintaining these bonds, with holidays, birthdays, church events, and milestone celebrations serving as occasions for family reunion and shared experience. Deandra Dontia James was 33 years old at the time of the incident on October 3, 2025, indicating a birth year of approximately 1992. This made her 4 years older than Kino Shea Wheeler. Information regarding Deandra's background, upbringing, place of origin, educational history, and career path prior to October 2025 remains limited in available public records. Her employment status, professional trajectory, and economic circumstances at the time of the incident have not been extensively documented in accessible sources. Previous romantic relationships, dating history, and relationship patterns before meeting Kino Shea are not detailed in public records. Her personality traits and characteristics as described by friends and family members who knew her personally are not widely available in news coverage or court documents accessible to the public. A critical question in any domestic violence case involves whether the accused individual had any prior criminal record or documented history of violent behavior. Whether Deandra James had previous arrests, convictions, protective orders filed against her, or documented incidents of aggressive or violent conduct prior to October 3, 2025, represents investigative information that law enforcement and prosecutors would have examined. The specifics of how Kino Shea Wheeler and Deandra James initially met, the location, circumstances, mutual connections, or social contexts that brought them together, are not publicly documented. The timeline of their courtship, the factors that attracted them to each other, and the early dynamics of their relationship remain undisclosed in available sources. The decision to cohabitate, the timing of when they moved in together, and their reasons for establishing a shared household on Beatty Street are details not currently available in public records. By October 2025, Kino Shea and Deandra were living together as domestic partners at the residence on Beatty Street in Greenville County. The exact duration of their relationship, whether it had lasted months, years, or a specific time frame, is not specified in available news reports. Their living arrangements included shared residence, though the details of how they divided household responsibilities, managed finances, and organized their domestic life are not publicly documented. The couple navigated their relationship as a same-sex partnership in South Carolina, a state located in the conservative Deep South with varying levels of social acceptance for LGBTQ relationships. Their support systems, the level of openness about their relationship in public versus private contexts, and the acceptance or rejection they experienced from their respective families are factors that would have influenced their relationship dynamics but are not detailed in available sources. Domestic violence in same-sex relationships occurs at rates equal to or exceeding those in heterosexual relationships. Statistical research indicates that 43.8% of lesbian women experience some form of intimate partner violence during their lifetime. For bisexual women, this rate increases to 61.1%, including violence, stalking, or rape by intimate partners. Among men, 26% of gay men and 37.3% of bisexual men experience intimate partner violence. These statistics demonstrate that domestic violence is not confined to heterosexual relationships, and that individuals in same-sex partnerships face substantial risks of experiencing intimate partner abuse. The unique challenges in LGBTQ relationships include power and control dynamics that may differ from heterosexual domestic violence patterns, though the fundamental mechanisms of control, intimidation, and violence remain consistent. The power and control wheel, a framework developed to understand domestic violence dynamics, applies to same-sex relationships with some modifications specific to LGBTQ contexts. Isolation tactics in same-sex relationships may include threats of outing a partner to family, employers, or community members who may not know about their sexual orientation. This represents a form of control unique to LGBTQ relationships where visibility and disclosure carry potential social, economic, and familial consequences. In the case of Kenosha Wheeler and Deandra James, several investigative questions remain. Were there previous arguments or conflicts documented by friends, family members, or neighbors? Was there a history of verbal abuse or escalating tensions that people close to the couple had observed? Did controlling behaviors manifest in financial control, social isolation, or emotional manipulation? Were there jealousy or possessiveness issues that created conflict in the relationship? Substance abuse by either partner can escalate domestic violence risk. Whether alcohol or drug use played a role in their relationship dynamics represents a relevant investigative question. Prior incidents reported to police, even if no arrests were made, would establish a documented pattern. Whether Kenosha had confided in friends, family members, or co-workers about relationship problems would indicate her perception of safety and her attempts to seek support. Whether friends or family noticed concerning patterns in their interactions, changes in Kenosha's behavior, or signs of control would provide external observations of the relationship health. Attempts to seek help through counseling, domestic violence services, or intervention programs would demonstrate recognition of problems and efforts toward resolution. These warning signs, if they existed, may have been visible to some observers or may have remained hidden within the privacy of their household. Barriers to reporting domestic violence in LGBTQ relationships include the fear of outing oneself to service providers, law enforcement, or court systems. For individuals not openly living as LGBTQ, seeking help for domestic violence requires simultaneous disclosure of sexual orientation, potentially exposing them to discrimination, family rejection, or employment consequences. South Carolina has limited LGBTQ-specific resources for domestic violence survivors. The potential for homophobia from service providers, law enforcement officers, or legal professionals creates additional barriers. Community pressures within LGBTQ networks to protect the community's image and avoid confirming stereotypes can discourage reporting. Persistent myths that domestic violence only occurs in heterosexual relationships contribute to invisibility and lack of recognition when same-sex partners experience abuse. The reality, supported by statistical evidence, is that same-sex partnerships experience domestic violence at the same or higher rates compared to heterosexual relationships. Yet services, public awareness, and institutional responses remain inadequate. October 3, 2025, was a Thursday. The weather conditions and atmospheric environment in Greenville, South Carolina, that day are not documented in available sources. Kenosha Wheeler's activities throughout the day, whether she worked at Resurgent Capital Sources, engaged in culinary preparations, or attended to personal matters, remain undocumented in public records. Deandra James's whereabouts and activities during the daylight and afternoon hours of October 3 are similarly not detailed in available information. Text messages, phone calls, or social media activity exchanged between the two women or with other individuals that day would be part of the investigative record but are not publicly disclosed. Last communications with family members or friends would establish Kenosha's state of mind and final conversations with people in her life. The emotional and psychological state of both individuals as they went through the day represents internal factors that may have contributed to the evening's events, but cannot be objectively determined without statements from the individuals themselves or observations from people who interacted with them that day. What constituted normal for a Thursday in their household? Typical routines, dinner preparations, evening activities, or interaction patterns would be known to the couple themselves and potentially to close friends or family members familiar with their daily life. The evening routine on October 3 involved both women returning to or being present at their Beatty Street residence. Whether dinner was prepared, ordered, or planned, and the initial interactions between Kenosha and Deandra when they were both home are details not available in public sources. The mood and emotional climate in the home during the early evening hours, whether calm, tense, ordinary, or strained, would only be known to the two individuals present. The trigger that shifted the evening from whatever was normal to a crisis situation represents a critical turning point, though the specific catalyst is not publicly identified in available reports. According to law enforcement statements, a verbal altercation occurred between Kenosha Wheeler and Deandra James on the evening of October 3, 2025. The approximate time the conflict began, though not precisely documented in public sources, preceded the 10 p.m. emergency call. The subject matter of the argument, what the two women were arguing about, has been identified by investigators but has not been publicly disclosed in media reports or official statements. The escalation pattern of the argument, how it intensified from verbal disagreement to a more volatile confrontation, represents a progression that occurred within the private space of their home. The specific words exchanged between the partners during this altercation are not documented in available sources. The volume and intensity of the argument, whether loud enough for neighbors to hear through walls or windows, is a relevant question for investigators who would have canvassed the neighborhood for potential witnesses. The physical positioning of the two women during the argument, whether they were in the living room, bedroom, kitchen, or another area of the residence, affects the spatial dynamics and access to objects, including weapons. The point of no return, when the verbal conflict transformed into physical violence, represents the moment when the situation became lethal rather than remaining a non-violent dispute. A firearm was introduced into the situation. The type of firearm used in the shooting, the location where the gun was normally kept within the residence, and the legal ownership status of the weapon are investigative details. South Carolina does not require firearm registration, making legal ownership documentation less traceable than in states with registration requirements. How Deandra James accessed the weapon during the course of the argument, whether she retrieved it from a specific location, whether it was already accessible, or whether its introduction was spontaneous or calculated, represents a critical element in understanding the shooting. Whether this was the first time a weapon had been introduced into their conflicts, or whether firearms had been present in previous arguments would establish a pattern of escalating danger. South Carolina gun laws regarding domestic violence include a 3-year firearm prohibition for individuals convicted of domestic violence misdemeanors. However, this prohibition only applies after a conviction has occurred. At the time of the October 3 incident, if no prior domestic violence convictions existed against Deandra James, no legal prohibition would have prevented her from possessing or accessing a firearm. At approximately 10 p.m. on October 3, 2025, a gunshot was fired inside the residence at 1 Beatty Street. The specific room or area within the residence where the shooting occurred has not been publicly disclosed. Kenosha Wheeler sustained a single gunshot wound. The anatomical location of this wound on her body, whether to the torso, head, extremities, or other area, determines the lethality and immediate medical consequences. The immediate aftermath of the gunshot involved Kenosha's condition rapidly deteriorating. Deandra James's immediate reaction to the shooting, whether she attempted to provide aid, called for help, or reacted in another manner, is documented in the investigation but not publicly detailed. The autopsy conducted by the Greenville County Coroner's Office would provide detailed findings on the cause of death, officially determined to be the gunshot wound. The manner of death was ruled as homicide, indicating that the death resulted from the intentional actions of another person. At 10 p.m., Greenville County Communications received a 911 emergency call from or regarding the address at 1 Beatty Street. The identity of the caller, whether Deandra James herself, a neighbor who heard the gunshot, or another party, has not been publicly specified in available reports. The content of the 911 call described an unresponsive female victim possibly in cardiac arrest. The characterization of the situation as a possible cardiac arrest, rather than a gunshot wound, raises questions. This description could indicate that the caller did not disclose the shooting, that the victim's condition was described based on her unresponsive state without mentioning the gunshot, or that information was communicated in a way that did not immediately convey the true nature of the emergency. The dispatcher would have provided instructions based on the information received and would have dispatched emergency medical services to the location. The response time for emergency services to arrive at the Beatty Street address would have been documented in dispatch records. Emergency medical services arrived at 1 Beatty Street following the 10 p.m. dispatch call. Upon arrival, first responders conducted an initial assessment of the scene and located Kenosha Wheeler. The discovery that she had sustained a gunshot wound rather than experiencing cardiac arrest would have immediately changed the nature of the emergency response. Paramedics would have assessed her vital signs, determined the extent of injuries, and evaluated whether life-saving measures were viable. Given that she was pronounced dead at the scene, emergency medical personnel determined that resuscitation efforts would be futile or that she had already died before their arrival. The pronouncement of death at the scene triggered the involvement of law enforcement. The Greenville County Sheriff's Office was called to the residence, transforming the location from a medical emergency scene to a crime scene. Officers secured the crime scene to preserve evidence, prevent contamination, and control access to the area. Evidence collection began immediately, with crime scene investigators documenting the scene through photographs, measurements, and detailed notes. The layout of the residence at 1 Beatty Street, including room configuration, furniture placement, and spatial relationships, would be mapped and documented. Physical evidence collected would include the firearm used in the shooting, spent shell casings or bullets, blood evidence, any items that showed signs of the altercation, and other materials relevant to reconstructing the events. Ballistics analysis would later determine the type of ammunition used, the trajectory of the bullet, and matching between the bullet and the firearm. Blood spatter patterns provide forensic information about the position of the victim at the time of shooting, the location of the shooter, and the sequence of events. The location of the weapon when law enforcement arrived, whether it was near the victim, in Deandra's possession, or in another location, provides information about post-shooting actions. Signs of a physical struggle, defensive wounds on the victim, or other injuries would indicate whether there was a physical altercation in addition to the verbal argument. Witness canvassing in the neighborhood involved investigators going door to door to interview residents on Beatty Street and surrounding areas. Questions would include whether neighbors heard arguing, shouting, or a gunshot, whether they saw anything unusual that evening, and whether they had prior knowledge of the relationship or any previous disturbances at the residence. When law enforcement officers arrived at the scene, Deandra James was present. Her specific location within or outside the residence at the moment officers arrived is not publicly documented. Her demeanor and emotional state, whether she was calm, distraught, agitated, or cooperative, would have been observed and noted by responding officers. Deandra would have provided an initial statement to officers explaining what occurred. The content of this statement, whether she disclosed the shooting immediately or described events in a particular way, represents a critical piece of the investigative record. Any injuries on Deandra, defensive wounds, marks, or other physical evidence of a physical altercation, would have been documented. Her clothing and physical appearance would be examined for gunshot residue, blood spatter, or other forensic evidence. Behavior patterns noted by investigators during their initial contact and subsequent interviews would inform their assessment of the situation. Her level of cooperation with authorities, whether she answered questions, requested legal counsel, or declined to speak, represents her legal rights being exercised during the investigation. Detective interviews with Deandra James would have occurred following her arrest or during the investigative process. Any inconsistencies in her account of events compared to physical evidence, witness statements, or her own previous statements would be scrutinized. Timeline reconstruction by investigators would involve establishing when each person arrived home, when the argument began, when the shooting occurred, and when the 911 call was made. Witness statements from neighbors, friends of both women, and family members would provide context about the relationship, any known conflicts, and observations from that evening. Phone records and text message analysis would reveal communications between Kenosha and Deandra and with other individuals leading up to the incident. Social media activity review could provide insights into the state of the relationship and communications that day. Financial records examination might reveal stressors or control issues. Prior 911 calls from the Beatty Street residence would establish whether domestic disturbances had been reported previously. The Greenville County Coroner's Office assumed jurisdiction over the death investigation. Official identification of the victim was conducted to legally confirm the deceased person was Kenosha Yvonne Wheeler. A preliminary examination at the scene allowed the coroner or coroner's investigator to make initial observations before the body was moved. Transportation of Kenoshia's body from the scene to the coroner's facility for autopsy was arranged. Next of kin notification to the Wheeler family was conducted by law enforcement or coroner's office personnel. Informing Gregory and Melissa Wheeler that their daughter had been shot and killed would have been delivered according to protocols for death notification. The family's reaction to this devastating news would have involved shock, grief, disbelief, and the beginning of traumatic bereavement. The autopsy was conducted by the Greenville County Coroner's Office. This comprehensive forensic examination provided detailed findings on the gunshot wound, including the entry wound location, trajectory through the body, potential exit wound, and damage to internal organs and structures. The range of fire, whether the weapon was fired at close range, intermediate range, or from a distance, can be determined through forensic examination of gunpowder residue patterns and wound characteristics. Toxicology results would reveal whether Kenoshia had any alcohol, drugs, or medications in her system at the time of death. Other injuries or findings from the autopsy would document any additional trauma or medical conditions. The official cause of death was documented as gunshot wound. The official manner of death was ruled homicide, legally certifying that Kenoshia's death resulted from the criminal actions of another person. The medical examiner's report, once completed, became part of the official case file used in criminal prosecution. Physical evidence linking Deandra James to the shooting was compiled by investigators. Forensic analysis results from the crime lab included gunshot residue testing to determine if residue consistent with firing a weapon was present on Deandra's hands or clothing. Fingerprint analysis would determine whose fingerprints were on the weapon, shell casings, or other relevant items. Witness testimony compilation involved organizing statements from all individuals interviewed during the investigation. Motive establishment required prosecutors to articulate why the shooting occurred, even if the specific trigger or subject of the argument was not publicly disclosed. The prosecution team assembly involved attorneys from the 13th Circuit Solicitor's Office reviewing the evidence and determining the appropriate charges. The legal threshold for arrest requires probable cause, sufficient evidence to believe that a crime was committed and that the specific individual committed it. Probable cause determination in this case was based on the physical evidence, witness statements, Deandra's presence at the scene, and other investigative findings. The charge selection process involved prosecutorial discretion about what criminal charges the evidence supported. The decision to charge Deandra James with murder rather than a lesser charge such as manslaughter indicates that prosecutors believed the evidence supported the elements of murder under South Carolina law. Murder charges require proof of malice aforethought, which can be express, intent to kill, or implied, reckless disregard for human life. The addition of the weapons charge, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, represents an enhancement charge under South Carolina law that carries mandatory additional sentencing. Deandra Dontia James was taken into custody on Thursday, October 3, 2025, the same night as the shooting. The arrest location and circumstances, whether she was arrested at the scene or transported to the sheriff's office for questioning before formal arrest, are not specified in available sources. Upon arrest, law enforcement officers would have read Deandra her Miranda rights, informing her of her right to remain silent and her right to an attorney. Transport to the Greenville County Detention Center followed the arrest. Booking procedures include administrative processing of the arrestee, including personal information recording, photographing, mugshot, and fingerprinting for criminal identification purposes. Personal property in her possession would have been confiscated, catalogued, and secured. Deandra James faces 2 criminal charges. The first charge is murder under South Carolina law. The murder statute in South Carolina defines murder as the killing of another person with malice aforethought. The elements of the offense that prosecutors must prove beyond a reasonable doubt include that a death occurred, that the defendant caused the death, and that malice aforethought existed. Potential penalties for murder in South Carolina range from 30 years to life imprisonment. The second charge is possession of a weapon during a violent crime. This is an enhancement charge under South Carolina Code Section 16-23-490. Conviction on this charge carries a mandatory consecutive sentence of 5 years imprisonment, meaning it must be served in addition to any sentence for the underlying violent crime, not concurrently. Critically, there is no parole eligibility for time served on this charge. A bond hearing was conducted, during which the prosecution and defense presented arguments regarding whether Deandra James should be released on bail pending trial. The judge denied bond, ordering that she be held without bond in the Greenville County Detention Center until trial. This decision indicates judicial determination that she poses a flight risk, a danger to the community, or that the severity of the charges warrants pre-trial detention. Whether Deandra was assigned a public defender from the public defender's office or retained a private attorney is not specified in available public records. South Carolina provides indigent defendants with court-appointed counsel if they cannot afford to hire a private attorney. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.